I still remember that night at JFK, rain streaking across the glass as I stood by the huge window, my heart racing. My fingers gripped the handle of my suitcase, trembling with a mix of hope and fear. The departure board flickered his flight number, its soft glow cutting through the dim terminal. I searched every face stepping off the plane, waiting for the smile that would make the months of distance worth it. But as the crowd thinned, an ache spread through my chest. Something was wrong. He wasn't there. And in that moment, I felt the floor shift beneath me. Welcome to the Untold Love, where stories of hearts, hope, and heartbreak come alive. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. My name is Emily, and if I close my eyes, I can still see the first moment I met Daniel as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was a chilly October evening in New York, the kind where the city feels alive, humming softly beneath a sky washed in gold and violet. I had almost skipped the art exhibit that night, tired from work, but something, maybe a quiet tug of curiosity, pulled me there. The gallery was warm and bright, full of voices and laughter, and I remember standing in front of a painting of an empty train station when I felt someone step beside me. He had this easy, calm presence that immediately put me at ease. When he spoke, asking what I saw in that painting, his voice was steady and warm, and there was a kindness in his eyes that caught me off guard. We ended up talking about everything, the artist, our favorite books, even the kind of coffee we couldn't live without. Daniel wasn't the loudest person in the room, but every word felt intentional, as though he truly wanted to know who I was. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like when someone really sees you. That night stretched into a long walk through the city streets. We found a little cafe still open, its lights spilling onto the wet pavement, and we sat there for hours, sharing stories over cups of steaming tea. There was no rush, no need to impress. We just fit, like puzzle pieces waiting for each other. By the time I finally headed home, the city was quiet, and I had a strange certainty blooming in my chest that something important had just begun. The weeks that followed were full of gentle surprises. He'd send me a photo of a sunrise with a simple message, "Thought of you this morning." Or he'd show up with a book he said reminded him of our conversation. Every gesture felt thoughtful, effortless, as if he'd been built to meet me exactly where I was. We laughed easily, we listened carefully, and we learned the shapes of each other's silences. But love, as I learned, doesn't always come wrapped in perfect timing. Just when we were finding our rhythm, Daniel received a job offer in San Francisco. I still remember the quiet in his voice when he told me over dinner, the way his fingers traced the rim of his glass like he was searching for the right words. I wanted to be happy for him, he deserved the opportunity, but part of me felt the ground tilt. We promised each other distance wouldn't change what we were building. We made plans, calls every evening, weekend visits when we could afford them, handwritten letters slipped between the usual texts. And for a while, it worked. There were nights when I'd fall asleep with my phone still warm in my hand, his laughter echoing softly through the line. Even from 3,000 miles away, he had a way of making me feel less alone. Looking back now, I realize how deeply I let him in, how quickly I built a world around the idea of us. I believed, with all my heart, that this was a love worth holding on to, no matter how far the miles stretched. The night before Daniel's flight, I barely slept. I kept picturing the moment we'd see each other again, the way his smile would light up the space between us. My apartment was a quiet storm of nerves and excitement, half-packed bags on the couch, flowers on the kitchen table, a little note I had written to slip into his jacket pocket. I must have checked the time a dozen times, caught between wanting morning to come faster and savoring the sweetness of waiting. When the sun finally rose, I felt as if I'd been holding my breath all night. I brewed coffee but couldn't finish it. My hands trembled as I texted him, "Good morning, safe travels, I can't wait to see you." His reply came quickly, just 3 words, "On my way." Simple, but enough to send warmth flooding through me. I could almost hear the familiar lilt in his voice, see the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. I spent the morning preparing as if for something sacred. I chose my favorite blue dress, the one he once said made me look like a painting, and paired it with a soft scarf because the forecast promised rain. I tucked the little note into my purse, rehearsing what I'd say when I handed it to him, something light, something that hinted at how much I'd missed him without letting all my feelings spill out at once. On the subway to JFK, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the city blur by in streaks of gray and silver. Every station we passed felt like another step closer to him. I imagined the way he would weave through the crowd toward me, the way his arms would feel around my shoulders, grounding me after months of distance. My heart felt too big for my chest, beating in quick, unsteady bursts. By the time I arrived at the terminal, my excitement had settled into a quiet, steady hum. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee and polished floors, a scent I now associate with that moment of expectancy. I bought a small bouquet of white tulips from a stand near the entrance, thinking of how Daniel once told me they reminded him of beginnings. I wanted him to see them first thing, to know I had been thinking of him in every detail. While waiting for his flight to land, I scrolled back through our messages. Letting myself linger over the last one, "Don't be late. I smiled, imagining his mock-serious tone. The playful grin that always followed. Around me, families reunited, friends embraced. Business travelers rushed past with weary expressions, but I was in a little bubble of happiness. Wrapped in the anticipation of finally closing the space between us. Everything about that day felt like a promise, the flowers in my hand, the steady rhythm of arriving flights, the quiet hope threading through my chest. I believed, without a single doubt, that soon I'd see him walking toward me, and that the wait would be worth every second. I reached the arrivals hall earlier than I needed to, my suitcase wheels clattering softly against the floor as I found a spot near the big glass windows. The monitors above me flickered with flight numbers, little digital promises of reunions about to happen. I checked Daniel's flight again, landed right on time. Relief swept through me like a warm breeze. Any moment now, I thought. Any moment, and this waiting would turn into the kind of embrace I'd been replaying in my mind for weeks. At first, everything felt like magic. People streamed through the doors, faces lighting up as they spotted loved ones. Children squealed and ran forward, suitcases tumbled across the tile, and the air pulsed with laughter, greetings, the soft thud of hugs after too long apart. I held my bouquet of tulips carefully, the paper crinkling in my hands. My heart thumped along with the steady rhythm of arrivals, each one a heartbeat closer to him. But as the minutes stretched, a thin thread of unease began weaving itself through my joy. I shifted from one foot to the other, craning my neck for a familiar face. I scanned every passenger rolling luggage toward the exit, searching for Daniel's tall frame, the way he always moved with a quiet confidence. Maybe he was at the back of the crowd, I told myself, waiting for his bag or letting others go first. The flow of travelers slowed. The hugs and reunions softened, leaving a handful of stragglers dragging their bags with tired expressions. Still no Daniel. I glanced down at my phone, no new messages. I checked the screen again, hoping for a text, just landed, be there soon. Nothing. My fingers hovered over the call button, but I hesitated. He was probably still in the baggage claim area, I reasoned, or maybe his phone was tucked in his pocket. I tried to steady myself, inhaling the scent of coffee drifting from the nearby kiosk, grounding myself in something familiar. The tulips trembled slightly in my grip, and I noticed how the petals had begun to open, fragile and bright against the muted tones of the terminal. Around me, the hall grew quieter, the echo of rolling suitcases fading as people filtered out into the rainy night. A dull knot formed in my stomach. I walked closer to the sliding doors, peering into the hallway beyond, where cleaners moved between empty chairs and abandoned carts. My reflection in the glass looked different, smaller, more unsure. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason, a delay, a misplaced bag, a call he needed to take. Another 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The airport speakers announced the next arrival, a reminder that time was moving even though I felt suspended, caught between hope and something heavier pressing against my chest. I tried calling him once, then again, the ringing slicing through the terminal's hush. No answer. My hand fell to my side, phone heavy in my palm. I stood there, still waiting, telling myself he'd appear any second now, because love stories don't just stop in the middle of an airport. They don't leave you standing alone, holding tulips, listening to the quiet after the crowd has gone. At first, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Daniel had gotten caught in the shuffle, customs, baggage claim, a wrong turn in the maze of corridors beyond those glass doors. But as the terminal emptied and the echo of rolling suitcases faded, a prickling unease began to spread through me. I stared at the tulips in my hands, their once fresh stems starting to wilt ever so slightly, as if they sensed the shift in the air before I did. I dialed his number again, pressing the phone tight against my ear, desperate to hear his voice. The ring sounded too loud, bouncing off the polished floor, but no one answered. I tried texting, "Hey, are you okay? I'm here, waiting." My words felt fragile, like paper boats I was sending into a tide I couldn't control. Minutes passed, and the screen remained blank. A memory surfaced, uninvited, our last video call, just 2 nights ago. He'd smiled at me, but there had been something else beneath it, a pause between sentences, a shadow behind his eyes. I'd asked if he was tired, and he'd nodded, brushing it off with a half-hearted laugh about work deadlines. I hadn't pushed, not wanting to add weight to whatever burden he was carrying. Now I wondered if that moment had been a sign, a tiny fracture I'd ignored because I wanted to believe everything was fine. My stomach tightened as I replayed our recent conversations, searching for clues. There had been that message where he said, "Things have been heavy lately." At the time, I assumed he meant work or the cross-country flights. But what if it was more than that? What if I'd been so focused on counting the days until this reunion that I'd missed him quietly pulling away? I sat down on a nearby bench, the bouquet resting across my lap. The paper crinkled softly, grounding me in a moment that felt increasingly unreal. Around me, the terminal had fallen almost silent, the kind of hush that makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat. I scrolled through our texts again, rereading them as if the answer might be hidden between the lines. Each message felt like a thread connecting me to him, but tonight, those threads felt thin, fraying under the weight of silence. For the first time, a sliver of doubt pushed through my hope. What if something had happened, an accident, a missed flight, a change of heart he couldn't voice? I tried to shake it off, clinging to the image of Daniel stepping through the sliding doors, tired but smiling, apologizing for making me wait. I needed to believe in that picture, in the man who had written me letters, who had walked with me through rain-soaked streets, who once told me I was his safe place. Still, as I sat there, phone heavy in my hand, I couldn't ignore the cold edge of fear beginning to settle in my chest. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a simple delay anymore. Something was keeping him from me, and I didn't know whether it was circumstance or choice. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the sliding doors, as if I could will Daniel to appear. The tulips drooped in my lap, their petals curling inward, and the airport lights above seemed too bright, almost harsh against the quiet ache spreading through me. My phone rested face up beside me on the bench, its dark screen reflecting my expression, hopeful and hollow all at once. Then, suddenly, the screen lit up. A notification glowed in the dimness, one new email. My heart leapt, then faltered when I saw his name. Not a text, not a call, an email, sent an hour ago, around the time his plane should have been boarding. My hands trembled as I tapped it open. The subject line was simple, "I'm sorry, Emily." I read the first line once, then again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less final. He wrote that he couldn't get on the flight. That he'd stood at the gate, ticket in hand, staring down the jet bridge while everything inside him wavered. He said he'd been trying for weeks to find the courage to tell me he was scared of the future we were building, of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Paragraph after paragraph, his voice bled through the screen, tender, hesitant, heavy with guilt. He wasn't ending us, not exactly, but he confessed he didn't know how to be the man he wanted to be for me. "I love you," he wrote, "but I don't trust myself not to hurt you." He said walking away from that flight was the hardest thing he'd ever done, yet in some way, he believed it was the kinder choice. I felt the world tilt, as if gravity had shifted beneath me. Around me, people moved in slow motion, families hugging, a janitor sweeping the floor, a couple laughing as they hurried past, but I was anchored in place, suspended between heartbreak and understanding. Tears blurred the email until the words became smudges of light. I tried to picture him at the gate, frozen with indecision, torn between boarding and retreating. A part of me wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed. But another part, quieter and steadier, recognized the rawness of his confession. It wasn't rejection out of cruelty. It was a surrender born of fear. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Memories of us flooded in, the first night at the gallery, the way he'd tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the letters written in his neat, careful handwriting. All of it was real, even if this ending was too. When I looked up again, the hall was nearly empty. The sliding doors opened and closed with a soft hiss, letting in the damp night air. I sat there, clutching my phone, and felt something inside me settle, not peace, not yet, but clarity. Daniel's absence wasn't an accident. It was a choice, and one I now had to find the strength to face. For a long while, I just sat there, letting the low hum of the airport wash over me. The last of the passengers had drifted away, leaving only scattered echoes of footsteps and the occasional distant announcement. My bouquet lay across my knees, petals loosened by the weight of the evening. I traced a finger along one of the tulip stems, its coolness steadying me as my heart tried to untangle itself from the ache. I reread Daniel's email, this time slower, letting each sentence land where it needed to. His words weren't easy, but they weren't careless either. They carried the quiet honesty of someone trying to tell the truth, even if it broke something open. A part of me wanted to hate him for not walking through those doors, for not giving me the dignity of goodbye, face to face. But beneath the disappointment was something softer, a recognition of how terrifying it can be to stand at the edge of love and wonder if you're enough. I folded the phone shut in my hands, resting it on top of the tulips. The hurt didn't vanish, but it shifted, less a sharp wound, more like a bruise settling deep inside. I realized I couldn't control the reasons people make their choices. I could only decide how to carry what they leave behind. Slowly, I stood, adjusting the strap of my bag on my shoulder. The glass doors ahead reflected me back, tired, tear-streaked, but upright. Outside, rain still whispered against the pavement, blurring the lights of waiting taxis. I stepped toward it, feeling the cool air brush my skin, washing away the heavy warmth of the terminal. With each step, I thought of the small, luminous things Daniel had given me, the laughter on city sidewalks, the handwritten letters, the way he'd looked at me like I was a story worth reading. Those moments weren't erased by tonight. They remained, stitched into the fabric of who I had become. Love, I realized, doesn't always last forever. Sometimes its purpose is to teach us how deep our hearts can reach, how strong we can be when what we wanted slips through our fingers. I paused just before the curb, lifting the tulips to my face. Their scent was faint now, but still sweet, like a memory you don't want to let go of entirely. I left them gently on a nearby bench, a quiet farewell, a small kindness to myself. Then I raised my chin, hailed a cab, and slid inside, watching the airport fade behind me. As the car pulled away, I felt a fragile calm settle in my chest. The night wasn't what I imagined, but it hadn't taken everything from me. Somewhere beneath the ache was a promise to heal, to carry forward the parts of love that make us braver. And in that quiet, I understood, even when someone chooses to leave, we still get to choose how beautifully we continue on.